and big events over the years, but I'm curious your perspective on yesterday afternoon, what it was like, and then we'll get to what it all means. Good afternoon.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, it was hectic. There have been a lot of big stories over the 40 years from Coach Bryant's retirement on in his career, but this was a big one, and this was unexpected. Nick Saban himself said he didn't know it until 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon when he was tested. I think he was doing an interview with Tom Rinaldi, and the trainers called him out one of the prep interviews for game day, and the trainers called him out of the meeting with Tom Rinaldi, which I'm sure was came as a surprise to Coach Saban. So he immediately went home, was retested, tested positive again. At that point, Alabama found it necessary for transparency's sake to release that he and Greg Byrne, the athletic director, had tested positive. So we got to talk to Nick Saban last night via Zoom, which was helpful, and got some answers, not all the answers, obviously. May get more tonight. I think he's planning to appear on his radio show tonight. I don't know whether that's changed or not, but as of this morning, it hadn't. As of this morning, he was still asymptomatic, working from home. So we'll get the latest, but you're correct about one thing. The biggest game of the year, possibly the biggest game of the year in the nation, maybe Clemson Notre Dame would be the other one, but quite possibly the biggest regular season game of the year is in town, my town, where I am, in 48 hours, and nobody's talking about it. nobody's really giving it a lot of discussion because of all the discussion about Nick Saban.
See, so let's talk about Saban, and obviously we will get more information later on, but there, as you know, so much misinformation, so many, I've done a number of interviews, I'm sure you've done more, and some of the questions are literally endless, and they're not even describable. Some of the lunacy that I've heard today, and I'm sure you have as well. So let's talk about what Nick Saban can or cannot do. He's being tested daily. Is there any possibility, and maybe the train's already left, that he could find out it was a false positive and end up being at the game?
That's positive. Excuse me. I've said positive so many times. That's possible. I would not classify it as a strong possibility, but if he's retested today, if it's negative, they'll retest again, and if they get 3 negatives and can confirm medically that it was a false positive, then he could coach. I don't know that he was tested twice yesterday, so I don't know what the probability of that would be. I mean, there are possibilities. First of all, this is, as everybody knows, this is unprecedented, the entire 2020 scenario, and so we don't know, because we don't have much history to rely on, how things are going to go. So that might be a possibility. It's something that they'll be monitoring. Nick said yesterday, again on the Zoom call, that they'll look into every possibility. He certainly doesn't want to be at home watching the game on television and not able to contact anybody, but that's the rule if he's in quarantine. So, and I think that he's been so proactive about these things. I think that he would observe the quarantine. I don't think he would rent a blimp and have run the ball Sark or pass the ball Sark circling on the blimp up above. But we'd see. There are options, but Mike Norvell at Florida State had to miss their game with Miami, and if circumstances are such that Nick can't coach, then Nick can't coach. The false positive possibility exist.
Okay, let's get to the
they've got another
protocol,
positive.
Cecil, because
Right.
people are in shock that he can't coach in the game. So, not to turn you into the class teacher, but why not? Why can't he?
Because the rules interpretation, and Steve Shaw has written an interpretation of this rule. I think it's 1411B. Is that if a coach is in quarantine, it's not the Hugh Freeze situation. You know, Hugh was in a hospital, famously photographed in a hospital bed in a press box for Liberty, but he wasn't contagious. It wasn't this situation. If a coach is quarantined, he can't have any contact, any electronic contact, can't use any technology to contact anyone connected with the team on the field from 90 minutes before the game, when the officials take over, till the game ends. Nick could do a Zoom pregame locker room thing 2 hours before the game. That'd be permissible, but once it's within an hour and a half, the only communication allowed is between the coaches in the press box and the field. For obvious reasons, that rule had existed before coronavirus. For obvious reasons, you don't want a bunch of coaches in various locations being able to beam in like it was Star Trek with their little telecommunicators to coaches on the sideline. So it's limited to coaches there in the press box. And again, we've already had examples of it this season. I don't know what Les Miles has decided. Maybe Nick and Les could get together, socially distant, and watch the games together on Saturday.
But see, we're talking direct communication. Is it conceivable that Nick Saban could communicate with someone else in that press box, and that someone else could communicate to someone else? I know I'm getting silly here, but
right.
You know Nick Saban better than all of us. I mean, the idea that Nick Saban is sitting there by the lake and not participating in this is just hard for me to believe.
Right, I agree with you, and Alabama's exploring every possibility, but the straightforward interpretation of the rule is that he can't do that.
And I guess my final question: Who's going to be monitoring his Wi-Fi to see that he does or doesn't?
That's a good question. I nominate you, Paul.
I'll be happy to. First of all, can you imagine, Cecil? I know this is not funny, but if something happens and his television goes out or the cable goes down or the satellite. I would not want. I want the man to recover and be healthy. I don't want him to have a coronary right there at his house.
It will be interesting to hear him describe his experiences. I don't know what he'd do. I don't know if he'd get in the sponsored automobile and rush to a local sports bar where he can watch it.
There's Saban at Baumhauer's.
There's sort of two Nick Sabans. There's the one that you correctly discussed that you just can't conceive. Nobody could have. The biggest game of the year, him having no input, being essentially locked down and away from it. There is the other Nick Saban who's tried to be a leader in terms of the COVID-19 protocols and so forth, and he might simply say, I have to accept this. So we'll see how it goes Saturday. We'll see. As Alabama continues to explore every conceivable option, I would say the likeliest thing is that he won't be there on Saturday. Beyond that,
so let's talk about his staff, because he's in closest contact with his staff. Obviously, I know they're being tested, and I know that none of us want to get into the guessing game. But Sarkisian's the head coach. We know he's been a head coach before.
Right.
Just describe Sarkisian to the audience, and certainly there's a lot in his background. This is a big game.
It is, and he's been in big games before, and knows how to approach those. He's got a Pac-12 background primarily from Southern Cal and Washington, but it's going to be a different kind of challenge for him. But I think that Nick's comfortable with that. I think he's comfortable. There are Kyle Flood, who's on the field staff, has also been a head coach, and then there are 4 analysts who have been head coaches: Mike Stoops, Major Applewhite, Charlie Strong, and the ubiquitous Butch Jones.
I knew you couldn't say that without snickering.
I'm not snickering at Butch. I'm just saying you see him all the time. You see him. He's the number 2 presence on the sidelines besides Nick, obviously. So that would be Butch has beaten Georgia before.
He has.
So it would be he's got experience with that. So there's plenty of experience. That's not the problem. You know, the issue is how it will affect the players who it could be a win-one if Nick's not there. It could be a win-one for the Gipper situation. Let's get fired up, or it could be a distraction for him. Very easily could be. Everybody in college football understands what a presence Nick Saban is on the sideline. What a presence he is in the locker room, and not to have that's going to be very, very different for the players on this team. Now, they may be mature enough to handle it, or it may be a distraction.
Cecil, without knowing any of the answers, but let's talk about the calendar for a second. He's diagnosed on a Wednesday. As best we know, he's asymptomatic. Next week is another big game. What are the parameters? I mean, do we think he's going to coach? Do we think he's out? What do we know?
The 10-day positive window would probably, if he tested positive at 2:00, he would become cleared 30 minutes before. I don't know exactly how much of a stickler they'll be, or whether they'll say, if it were necessary, the SEC make a ruling on this. But he certainly could fly to Knoxville to get the day of the game. They could get him a jet and get him up there, and he could coach. My guess, I'm strictly guessing, this is strictly hypothetical. Greg Sankey could overrule anything I say or anything anybody else says, is that he'll be able to coach at Tennessee.
Another former assistant of Nick Saban. Seems like the whole schedule has former Nick Saban assistants.
The whole world. But yeah, this one is the former assistant plus the former strength coach plus the ramifications on the field are fast. This was going to be one of the most fascinating games of the year before any of the off the field happened. So hopefully, everybody's got another round of testing, Georgia and Alabama. Lane Kiffin says that Ole Miss is dealing with an outbreak. Alabama was on the field with Ole Miss a week ago, or less than a week ago. Don't know what kind of potential there is for on-the-field transmission. Don't know what the situation was where they stayed in Oxford or the Oxford area the night before. So many of those ramifications. We'll see what the Friday testing reveals. But if it's kicked off Saturday night as planned, it's one of the most fascinating games independent of this. You can't make it independent, but independent of it, it was going to be, I think, the most fascinating game of the year because of the contrast in styles, the stakes, the personalities, the high-powered offensive players that Alabama has against that Georgia defense. And I hope that there's some way, I can't see what way that would be, that some of that normalcy will come through.
Final question. Now, we'll finally get to the field. With or without Nick Saban, who do you like?
It's interesting. How do you calculate home field advantage? I think that the way Georgia plays, and Georgia shouldn't change. They shouldn't look at what Lane Kiffin did and say, well, we're going to play that way. Georgia should be Georgia because they've been an outstanding team. But I think the styles make for a better matchup for Alabama. And it's going to come down to the quarterback I'll take Mac Jones. Stetson Bennett's done exactly what Kirby Smart wants him to do this year, but this is going to be a different situation for him in terms of perhaps being put in a situation where he has to make a play to win the game. The flip side of that is Alabama's defense needs to be a lot better than it was at Ole Miss, or it doesn't matter if Georgia lines up in the wing T. If Alabama can't tackle and can't align correctly, then Georgia's going to win the game. But I'm gonna lean to Alabama, although there's such chaos around this game that I could change my mind in 24 hours.
And my final question, I've gone long here, knowing your relationship with Coach Saban, will you be in the press box or at Nick Saban's house watching the game?
I will be in the press box.
Okay.
Paul, so.
Smart.
But I will not be in contact with any Alabama staff member during the game.
Because I think there's a rule against that too. Cecil?
There is, and there's all kinds of rules against it.
Yeah.
Not ethical.
I've never been much of a rules follower, so I am going to Saban's house
No,
Saturday.
you haven't, Paul. You've been a rules. I hate to say breaker, but bender for sure.
Exactly. Cecil, thanks. Always great to talk to you. We will talk very soon.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, appreciate it. The one and only Cecil Hurt, the longest-running guest in the history of this show. The Gamecocks, Griff in his normal Thursday slot. In the final hour, we will talk to Heather Dinich about the world of college football and the Saban conundrum, and Connor Bazelak, the quarterback of the Mizzou Tigers. Let's get to the calls, and Eddie starts us off in Florida. How are you, Eddie?
Hey, Paul. How you doing, my man?
Eddie, we're doing well. Thank you.
Low damn tide. Hey, Paul, I know a lot of people are, going crazy because of the COVID diagnosis of Nick Saban, but I think if it's a team that's prepared for it, Paul, they got experience, coaching experience, and Mark, he's coach. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I think we'll still win the game. Nothing's going to change that, Paul. Hey, I got a couple of questions for you, Paul.
Okay.
Hey, Paul, do you think Georgia can hold Najee Harris 50 yards or under?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's my question. So I want to continue to hit on this defense because I'm saying, Paul, that I see LSU in this game, a LSU type of game. What I mean by that is Mac Jones is very accurate, just like Burrows were. We got the best receivers in the game. We probably 7 deep at receivers, 3 deep at running back, and one of the best offensive lines in college football. Okay, and the number 1 scoring offense in the college league. So I think if we're able to run the ball, Paul, I see Bama winning by 14, my man. That's what I see. Beat Bama, because I'm going to take Mac Jones. Paul, if you look at the RPA, since the inception of run-pass offense, Paul, you can throw that saying out the window that defense win championships. That doesn't matter anymore. I haven't seen the defense win a championship since RPOs got implemented. Georgia's the only one not running RPOs. Everybody else is running RPOs, Paul. You have to score. And if you're going to win a championship in college football now, Paul, you got to have an elite quarterback, Paul. So I see us winning this game by 14. Roll damn Tide.
Spoken like a true Tide fan. We'll take
earlier in the week, and then Florida, LSU having to get postponed. Ole Miss, Coach Lane Kiffin talking about earlier today that they're having some challenges right now between positive tests and contact tracing. And now Saban, it just feels like this was always going to be a really big challenge. And I think to Sankey's credit, he has said that this is always going to be a challenge, and that's just getting through the first week wasn't enough. You have to try to get to the end of things. But I think the last 2 or so days have just shown how difficult this is going to be throughout the season to try to have anything close to what we consider to be a normal season. I would be very surprised if Saban was the only person on the football side to test positive. As you said, he's in contact with quite a bit of people, and I think they've been taking things very seriously. But just by proxy of being around people, whether that's going to be whether it's going to be assistant coaches or support staffers. I think there will be, unfortunately, other people who will test positive from this, and that then raises other questions. At what point can the show go on? I think at this point, if Saban's the only one who is missing the game, I think the game goes on Saturday. But if he's missing 3 assistants and another 10 players test positive, well, you might have some serious challenges there, and put the SEC in a very difficult position of losing its really marquee game of the season to either have to postpone it or just gets played kind of with these big issues hanging over it. So I think that's going to be, the next few days are going to be huge for that. Alabama's doing daily testing, which I think should help root out what the potential consequences of this are. But I think it would be a bit naive to think that Saban, well, we know Greg Byrne too, but that those are the only 2 people that are going to test positive in the entire athletic department, and in particular the football team. I wrote a story a few years back, it might have been last year actually, about how Nick Saban essentially never gets sick, and when he does start to feel, whether it's cold symptoms or whatever, that he has just kind of the mental fortitude to power through them. Certainly, COVID-19 is a little different than a head cold or anything like that, but Saban's pretty legendary in that building for pushing through when in those kind of challenges that might, take somebody like me down. He kind of pushes through them.
And let's take a look at winning with style. And with style as well, brought to you by Belk. So who is winning with style? How about Najee Harris? Hard to have a better game than he did last week. Spiller was pretty impressive. So was Kevin Harris. Bigsby for Auburn continues to impress. Big performances neat out of all of those this weekend. And we are back, and Tom is up next in Dallas. Good afternoon, Tom. Thanks for the time. Good afternoon to you.
Same to you. Yeah, Paul, I have a friend who goes on the internet. My eyes are so bad I can't use it, and has read 2 different stories about Urban Meyer being highly critical of Tom Herman. And I told him, you can't, it wouldn't shock me, but you can't believe everything you see on the internet. Have you heard anything about that?
I have not, but if you're talking about Tom Herman right now, there's a pretty good chance you're being critical, because he is one of the most underwhelming coaches in the country based on what he is being paid, also commensurate with where he is. It's interesting, the relationship between Urban Meyer and Tom Herman. Of course, most of you know Herman was his offensive coordinator when he won the national championship, and quite frankly played a critical role in doing so. He was brilliant up there, but they had a major falling out, and whether Urban has needled him or not, I don't know. I haven't really seen a lot of Urban on TV lately, but it is interesting that I have heard Urban's name linked to that job, even though there is no job at UT.
Well, yeah, and I knew that Harmon was his offensive coordinator, and Ash was his, Texas current defensive coordinator,
right.
Was out there and won national. And I wondered if Urban might have an interest in the job. Is why he's being so critical. Although I'm not saying he doesn't need to be criticized.
Yeah, Tom, let me say this about Urban. He's a crafty guy, and without knowing, I probably shouldn't offer too much of an opinion, but I don't believe Urban is doing anything more than just giving an analysis of the game, which he does, and I'm certain he's being careful, because Urban knows how people are twisting and turning everything he says.
Okay, that's... But it's really...
But I will offer this. I have a friend who's very close friends with Urban, and I will check that out just to make sure, because I really don't know. I watch games on Saturday, but I do not pay much attention to the talking heads.
Well, I've never seen him be critical on the pregame. Of course, television might be very different. Of course, if something gets out there on the internet, I think that...
Tom,
ESPN or somebody would pick it up.
Yeah, I rather doubt it. I mean, I'm not going to say that it hasn't happened, but you can say almost anything. I'm on various programs where you're asked a pointed question and your answer may just be a quip or a comical line, and next thing you know, it's a headline on the internet. It happens to everyone. The more you're on, the more you are going to get blown out of proportion. But I will tell you, knowing Urban, I'm not saying we're friends, we're not, but knowing him as long as I have, I sincerely doubt that he is doing anything other than analyzing the college football on the field, because that's just not the way he is. Thank you for the call. Let's.
Thank you.
You bet. Call again soon. Brad is up next in Jacksonville. Hey, Brad, go right ahead.
Hey, Knucklehead Paul, how you doing today?
I'm okay.
That's good. That's a bunch of bull crap about the players and coaches getting tested positive and having no symptoms.
Where are we talking here?
It's a bunch of bull crap. They should be playing.
Okay, Brad, I'm not sure I understand. What school are we talking about here?
We're talking about the Gators, man.
Okay.
All their players out.
So you don't think they should? Well, explain to me what you're saying here. I'm not sure I understand.
I think they should be playing.
Okay. You think the game should have gone on?
Yeah. If they had no symptoms, they should be playing.
Well, first of all, you do understand the SEC protocol, don't you?
Yeah, it's pretty messed up.
It's pretty messed up.
Yeah, it is.
So, Brad, you're suggesting that if you have 21 players who are positive for a virus, and whether they're having symptoms or not, or, by the way, that has nothing to do with whether you can shed the virus. You are aware of that, aren't you?
Yeah, the virus is a bunch of bullcrap.
Okay. So your thesis is that the virus is bullcrap, therefore it really doesn't matter, and everyone should play. Is that correct?
That's right, Paul.
And may I ask you what your point of reference is on this analysis?
Yeah, my point is they should be playing football, man.
Okay. And it doesn't matter whether they're sick or positive or not, right?
That's right.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm. It's not really up to me. I really don't understand why you feel that way. You don't think it's a safety risk?
It is, but they should be still playing.
So you're essentially saying, if I could maybe put words in your mouth, that the most important thing is the football, right?
Yeah, man. Gotta get the season on.
Got to get the season. Okay. Well, yeah, I want to see the games too. I was fairly disappointed. I wanted to see LSU in Florida this weekend.
Yeah, I wanted to, man.
You're a Gator fan?
Yeah, I'm a big-time Gator fan. Go Gators.
Okay. Well, hopefully they'll play next week.
Yeah, hopefully they'll play.
Yeah. But if they don't, you're not going to be happy, right?
No, I'll be mad, man.
Okay. Brad, final question. Do you think that you think there should be any protocols, or just do whatever you want?
There should be, but should be allowed to be playing football.
But Brad, if the protocol says you test positive and you go below a certain level of 53 players, shouldn't you follow the protocol?
Yeah, you should.
Well, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, but.
Final question: Do you think there should be any protocols, or just do whatever you want?
But it's just a bunch of bull crap, right?
It is, man.
Okay. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it. Cat Daddy, do you agree with our friend down in Jacksonville? Just a bunch of bull crap?
I believe that young man is a French fry short of a Happy Meal. But anyway, I'm ready for the picks today, Mr. Finebaum.
Let's have, okay.
Guaranteed. And Dennis Sheridan, please stop calling me every 5 minutes, ask me who I'm going to pick. Here they are right now, Danny, so quit calling. Take Alabama to beat Georgia in a close one. UT is going to beat Kentucky big time. The Gamecocks will defeat the Auburn Pussycats. And A&M wins another one, Bo Mack up in San Antonio. Take it to the bank.
Well done. Hey, thank you for the call. Appreciate it. And we are heading to a break. I may be heading to a bar if you don't see me in a few minutes. Much more to come. We are back after this. Great.
I guess it would be a topic to discuss, and that is concerning Nick Saban. And sorry about him having COVID-19. Him not being on the sideline to coach, I don't think that is going to make a huge deal. I really don't. The game is going to be played how it is going to be played anyway. And I think that they have quality and smart enough players on Alabama's team where they should be able to play that game without him. They might play better without having to come off of the field after making a big mistake and have to look at the scowl on his face. But either way it goes, Bulldogs will win. Go Dogs. And I know you thought I was for Alabama, didn't you?
Not really, but I'm glad to hear from you. Johnny is up next. Hey, Johnny.
What's going on, Paul?
Hey there.
Hey, man, who y'all picking? Are y'all picking Auburn? Or not Auburn, but are y'all picking Georgia or Alabama, man?
I don't know yet. Tell me.
I don't know. I'm confused myself. Everybody's picking Alabama and everybody's picking Georgia. I don't know. I don't know which team was going.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to have Mike Griffith on in about an hour, and whatever he picks, I'm going the opposite.
Okay. All right. Sound good to me, man. It sounds really good to me. Because everybody's picking Georgia, everybody's picking Alabama. I don't know which team to pick myself.
Well, I mean, it's a close game. I mean, I think that would be the understatement. The Saban factor is certainly interesting. Drew is in North Carolina. Hey, Drew.
Hey, I was just curious why Dan Mullen, he wants 9,000 fans in his stadium, and he gets criticized when he has the governor's backing to do it. And why can't people come at their own risk?
Well, people can, Drew, come at their own risk. People can literally do whatever they want to do. I think you just heard the guy a minute ago from Florida say he doesn't know why that you can't have a game. But you know, it's ultimately, I mean, the governor sets the template. You are correct. But ultimately, it is up to the university. And the university has chosen not to have more than 22% of the fans.
Yes, but in my opinion, 99% of people that are under the age of 65 are not dying from coronavirus. So why are we having all these regulations and stuff for 0.1% of the population?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm a talk show host. I'm not a public health official. I've heard some, but you know, so you know, if you don't.
But I don't understand why we like. I know you said that it's the university's decision, but shouldn't there be fans? That's the 12th man in the stadium. So shouldn't it always plays a big influence in the game. So like any home team wants to have their fans there because it puts a new element into the game. And that's the thing that's missing, and it's just so different. And I feel like that people should be able to come at their own risk to the game. If you think you're going to get coronavirus, then just don't come. I feel like if they opened up the stadiums, that people would rush in because they want to be at that game. They want that experience of 90,000 people. And I'll tell you, I've been to an Alabama game and a Tennessee game, and there is nothing like being in a crowd of 100,000 people. There's just nothing like it.
So, I mean, obviously, it would not bother you one bit to go to the game with 100,000 people. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you'll get your opportunity, but I certainly hope you do whatever you want to do. Appreciate it. Thanks for the call. We are heading to a break. We have 3 more hours to go. Been a pretty entertaining first hour, and we will take a short break. Tyler Horka is up next.
Results, but you know you're very close and heading in the right direction. And sometimes you are getting results, and I've done this as a head coach. I'm getting results, I'm getting wins, But at the same time, I know there's major issues, sometimes even more so than if you're getting results. So there's a combination of things there that goes with it. I was very proud. I definitely believe we're heading in the right direction. But then to get the win on top of that, it helps our players and where they're going and what's going and happening. And that's the media's job to create those narratives, and that's the truth. So we have to overcome it. We're in the West, we know it, but we've played more 1 and 2s than anybody ever has in 2 years. So, but we're learning to get better, and we got to keep going. Well, I think one, he's learning to control those moments better. He's learning to make plays. Maturity. You have maturity in what's going on, how it's going on, and guys around him played really well. I mean, Isaiah Spiller runs the ball tremendously, which he did a great job. Our receivers, Chapman, Nia Smith, Chase Lane, those guys all made plays. But I'm going to tell you, the unsung hero of this whole group right now, we keep talking, we're not one's talking about, is our offensive line. Our offensive line is really playing good football. They're protecting, they're running, and we're providing him the tools around himself to keep playing, and he's got to keep making good decisions and taking care of the football. Well, first, I'm always concerned, period, no matter if nobody has an outbreak, because like you say, it can happen at any time. 2, I was very concerned because Florida was there, but we have the chips in our pads that has the contact tracing going back. We had nobody with it, and we have tested Saturday, we have tested Tuesday, and we test tomorrow again Thursday, and we have had no positives in the first 2 days of testing and anything that's going on. So I'm always very nervous of that, but at the same time, through the contact tracing and the things that went on during the game, plus our testing right now, we have come up negative. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that we stay there, but you're always concerned about that, Paul. Well, the thing about it is what we've told our players, we've told our coaches, listen, guys, in the beginning, we are so excited. You're making sure you're doing everything right, but you're constantly keeping update. All right, what's they saying today? What are they saying today? What are they say? And I quit doing that. I said, listen, tell me what we have to do and why we got to do it. And I told our players and coaches, we're changing daily or weekly by what's going on, but you got to understand, we can't let frustration set in. What happens is what happens. We have to do everything in our power, as we tell our players and our staff, control what we can control, be safe, take the proper arrangements to make sure you're safe.
And we welcome you back. The second hour of the program is live, and we're hoping the next 3 are a little calmer than the rest of the week. It's been a topsy-turvy, up and down roller coaster ride. So far, so good for today. We've already talked to Cecil Hurt. We'll talk to many more people, including our next guest. He is Tyler Horka from the Clarion Ledger. He covers Mississippi State. And Tyler, it was 3 weeks ago that Mike Leach was the talk of the town. Everyone loved him. He was the coach that my program should have hired. How's he doing now? Good afternoon.
Yeah, I think that honeymoon phase is over, Paul. It's crazy how quickly things can change, but in this conference, 1 week you're on top of the world like he was, beating LSU, and then the next 2 weeks you're kind of at the bottom of the mountains. So it's been an interesting first month of the Mikey Leach era at Mississippi State, and if that's any indicator of how the whole tenure is going to go, then it's going to be a bumpy ride, a roller coaster, as he said after the Kentucky loss last week.
Tyler, I know you've done a lot of deep diving on Mike Leach's background and career, but what we saw last week with no offensive points, has that ever happened?
No, that's the first time in his head coaching career that his offense has never produced a score. And I mean, that's almost 20 years worth of head coaching experience right there at Texas Tech and Washington State. So it was really surprising, but the way that game went and the way Mississippi State's offense looked, it was fitting that the only points that Mississippi scored was a botched snap by Kentucky that the punter had to just kick out of the end zone for a safety. So that was kind of a carryover from the Arkansas game, though, too. So that's 2 straight weeks of Mississippi State's offense not looking very good under Mike Leach, which is very uncharacteristic, as we said.
How did he attempt to explain it?
Well, I think he kind of played the blame game a little bit, which has happened in his tenure. You go back to Texas Tech, and I think he said the players are focusing too much on their fat girlfriends. He didn't say that this time, but he did say that there might be some malcontents in the program that he's looking to purge. And he kind of doubled down on that Monday, but he wasn't as forceful in his language. He said, look, anytime you take over a program, these aren't the players that I recruited, so there's going to be a lot of guys who probably don't fit my offensive system and probably don't fit my culture in general. So I think this year he's just trying to get through it at this point. It hasn't been the start that Mississippi State had hoped for. And you look at that LSU win, and it probably doesn't mean as much as everyone thought it did 3 weeks ago, with LSU losing to Missouri and having one of the worst defenses in the conference, quite frankly. So 7 more games of this, and I think Mississippi State fans and Mike Leach probably would just be glad to maybe get out of it with a 500 record, but that's not looking very likely either.
Tyler, when you start blaming your own players, and I don't care who recruited them, they are your players. If you wanted to run them off, you could have done so earlier. How does that play with the fans? And really, more important, how does that play with future recruits?
Well, I think that's kind of twofold. With future recruits, I wouldn't be so certain it's a good thing because, these are guys that they can't go play anywhere, obviously. You're only going to get a certain amount of offers, but Mississippi State might be one of their best offers. And if these guys start choosing not to play at Mississippi State, I think it's going to fall back on Mike Leach and what he said and some of the things that he's doing. But for fans, there's kind of a perception that they're going to follow their unquestioned leader, right? Everyone's loved Mike Leach so far, and even with the 1-2 start, I think there's a lot of people who are still just, full bore with everything that he wants to do. So the fans are kind of like, okay, yeah, if Mike Leach says that we need to get some of these guys out of here, I'm totally with them. But future recruits, which is what college football is kind of based on, right? You're only as good as the players that you bring in and the players that you develop. It's kind of a sticky situation with what he said.
And how do you think, you watch this team, how is he going to solve this problem?
Well, honestly, it's an execution issue. I mean, these guys last week, they were 5 of 17 on third down. And you look at first and second down, and they're picking up a few yards, Everyone knows that the book is kind of out, and leave it to Arkansas, of all programs, to kind of set the blueprint that you need to rush 3 and drop 8 into coverage to beat Mike Leach's offense. And it worked then. Kentucky did the same thing. It worked then as well. The short passes are there. KJ Costello has completed a plethora of passes in the last 2 weeks, but for what, right? What is 300 yards when you're not getting the 20 yards that you need to get into the end zone and score? They're not getting third down conversions. They're not getting fourth down conversions. They're not staying on the field. And sometimes they're not even getting that far because KJ Costello has thrown 9 interceptions this year, 7 in the last 2 weeks. You can't turn the ball over and expect to score any points. I don't care if you're Mike Leach or any other offensive guru in the country. It's an execution issue, and when they're trying to beat the zone defense by going downfield, they're getting intercepted. So it's a little bit on KJ Costello. Mike Leach has said it's a lot on the offensive line. They're getting beat by a 3-man rush. It's 5-on-3, and KJ Costello is having to run for his life and throw the ball up into the air into double and triple coverage. So everything's not going well right now. And even Kylan Hill, who led the SEC in rushing yards last year, he only has 15 carries. So you start to wonder if maybe he's getting a little frustrated. Yeah, he's caught a lot of balls, and that's what he was promised. But again, like I said, what do these yards really mean if they're not ending up in points, ending up in touchdowns, and ultimately ending up in victories?
Tyler, let's deal with the schedule. And you mentioned 500, so we're three weeks in. Let's talk about it the rest of the way. And as we consider what's ahead, what are your thoughts? I mean, we had an idea a couple weeks ago, but you have to reevaluate, I'm sure.
You talk about reevaluating right now. It's going to be really sticky if they don't somehow find a way to beat Texas A&M, which they've done 3 times in a row at Davis-Wade Stadium. Texas A&M has not won in Starkville since a guy named Johnny Manziel was playing quarterback, so maybe you have a little bit of hope there. But, they are not favored in that game. So say you drop that, and there's probably no chance you beat Alabama. All of a sudden, halfway through this 10-game conference-only slate, you're 1-4, and you're starting to wonder, okay, Vanderbilt becomes a must-win game. I know it's Vanderbilt, but you hadn't beat anybody since week 1, so you might want to get that one. And then you talk about maybe Missouri and Ole Miss being winnable games for Mississippi State on the schedule, just because Ole Miss hasn't shown that they can stop anybody, and you like to think that Mike Leach's Mississippi State offense kind of figures it out by that last game of the season. But yeah, those might be the remaining wins. And if you're talking about 5-5, that's only what I said, maybe 3 winnable games. Plus, you hope and pray for an upset against Texas A&M. I think a winning season is certainly out the window by now.
Yeah, you also have Auburn and Georgia. You're right. I mentioned the fans early on. Fans are fans. It seemed like everybody was, buying into Mike Leach. You talk to fans, hear from fans every day. What are they saying?
I think you just go back to how crazy this offseason has been, and it's been crazy for everybody, but trying to completely overhaul a coaching staff and implementing a system that how many schools in Mississippi are running a spread like this, and a spread that's kind of unique with the way Mike Leach runs at the air raids. So it comes down to giving him a little bit of time. But I will say there's another team in Mississippi right up the road that's also 1-2, and they're kind of losing on Lane Kiffin's terms. I mean, Lane Kiffin just put more yards and points on the board than anybody has against Alabama in the Nick Saban era. That catches some eyes, and we go back to the recruiting thing. If what Lane Kiffin is doing is working, and Mississippi State is losing games the exact same way that they did in the Joe Moorhead era, that raises a lot of questions for Mike Leach. So I think the first thing that fans want to see is him figure it out. And even if they lose, 38-35 against some of these better offensive teams in the SEC, I think they'll feel better too. And losing 21-14 against Kentucky and Arkansas, respectively, not a very good thing. Not what fans want to see. And Mike Leach needs to figure that out.
Tyler, many thanks. Great to have you on. It's always good to see you. Come back soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Paul. Love coming on.
Thank you very much. We love Tyler. And before we go to a break, let me give you an update on Nick Saban. We've been waiting for this all day long. This is coming from Jeff Allen, his close associate and the associate AD and trainer for sports medicine. He said in a statement released moments ago, Coach Saban was evaluated by our team physician, Dr. Jimmy Robinson, today. Coach Saban remains asymptomatic at this point and is doing fine. He is continuing to self-isolate and will remain in
the football stadium, and so he could communicate with the coaches. And the next comment is I don't understand during the Ole Miss game when Ole Miss has got such a fast-paced offense, especially the first half, why we didn't take any timeouts. We lost those timeouts when we went in the locker room. I understand not taking timeouts in the second half because you might want to win the game at the last minute or two of the game. But when they had us on their heels, so to speak, and we were disoriented, not lining up correctly, I don't recall us ever using one of our timeouts. But anyway, once again, thanks a lot, and maybe I can get some answers to those questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great one,
appreciate it very much. The second question is, I don't know. It seems like you should never take your timeouts in the first half to the locker room if you need to break things down or slow things down. As far as the first question, once you test positive according to the protocol, you must isolate or self-isolate, and that means away from the program, away from the facility. So unless he isolated to begin with at Bryant-Denny Stadium and they decided to make that his new residence, I don't think he would be able to do that. It's fairly well stated out. Hey, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. How about Rusty in South Carolina? You're on the air. Go right ahead, Rusty.
Mr. Finebaum, thank you for taking my call. Hope you're doing okay.
I am doing well.
I would have called you Monday, but I didn't want to mess up your Mad Monday because I wasn't mad at all. I was thrilled we won a game. The Gamecocks whooped the Commodores, and I was so happy. I said, hey, let's go to 5 points. Then I ain't talking Birmingham now, even though they got a good one. And so I was saying, oh, that's going to spike the corner if we all go down there and party. But yesterday, or day before yesterday, the University of South Carolina reported on campus positive infection rate from testing of less than 1%. Now, I don't know if they're doing anything right or they're just lucky. Carolina hasn't been known to be lucky in the past. But I'm going to go with it. And I'm going to tell you, Brother Cat Daddy, I'm going to take his word that we're going to whoop Auburn. Because I tell you, pass the butter, I can smell the corn, you know. But before I leave you, Paul, I want to ask you a question. And that question is, why did the Fighting Wild Rooster go into the KFC?
Why is that?
He wanted to see a chicken strip. Cock-a-doodle-doo.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it very much. Let's go to Mike next in Georgia. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Paul, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
Oh, I just wanted to talk real quick about, well, first is that idiot Brad from Jacksonville who called earlier and basically said no matter how many positive cases you have, you should be out there playing and everything else. The only thing I can figure is he must be like a blood relative of Harvey Updike, because if Updike's a 10 on the nut scale, this guy's obviously around an 8.
Yeah, I'm now to the point where if somebody wants to have an opinion on COVID and football, let them have it. I'm no longer trying to be the COVID police here.
Well, I'm not asking you to be the COVID police. The other one is that guy from North Carolina that calls, talking about wanting to sit in a stadium with 100,000 people, which I understand wanting to sit in a big crowd and getting into it. And then, of course, his rationale is like, there's a 99% survival rate. But what about the 1%, Paul? Somebody like me who has very bad pre-existing conditions, AFib, previous surgeries, one kidney. If I get that stuff, I'm probably pretty much gone.
Yeah, Mike,
I don't
think I don't think the survival rate is the issue. And this comes from far more learned people than the two of us. It's the fact that you can pass it along to someone like you. You can have a 17-year-old can take it home to you. If you're having a family gathering, and that's the danger. Not, I mean, most people are doing great with it. I mean, Saban so far is surviving very well.
Well, thank goodness, and I hope he continues to stay just like he is. But like you said, I mean, if I go to the pharmacy next week, which I'm going to have to do,
sure,
or I have to go to the grocery store because I got to go get some food. What if I encounter one of those people that were at the game, even though it's not going to hurt them? It could be a death sentence.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of. First of all, we don't need any more statistics on COVID. We're 7 months into this. We've heard it all.
Well, I agree with you. All right, Paul. I'm not trying to be negative. Have a good day, and I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Thank you, Mike. You stay well. Take care of yourself, man.
Yes,
Elvis.
Thank you.
Elvis is up next. I don't know how well Elvis is on a Thursday afternoon. I hope he's okay.
Mr. Finebaum, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I'm a first-time caller, and I never thought I'd have anything to call your show about. I listen to you all the time and watch you. But I've got a quick little story to tell you, if you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
In 1968, I heard a man call a football game, and I fell in love with him, and I fell in love with the team. And that man was John Ward, and that team was Tennessee.
You bet. Give him 6.
No more, though. And I'll tell you why.
Why's that?
I wanted to keep up with my school, so I got the Knoxville Sports Radio app and have been listening to them for quite a while now.
Mm-hmm.
I know you know this guy, Jimmy Hyams.
Jimmy Hyams, yeah.
He made a statement on the radio. In his 30 years of covering Tennessee football, hardly any Memphis player ever works out. Now, I don't know. He said he was echoing a statement Tommy West told him, but I don't know why he would reiterate that story and try and alienate the biggest city in their state.
Well,
Not
Elvis...
only did Mr. Hyam say that, but Pat Ryan, former quarterback.
Sure, I
he's on
remember
that
Pat.
He's on that radio station, and they asked him one time on a show, what bowl game would you like to see us go to? And he made the statement, any place but Memphis. Now, I'm going to tell you, Mr. Hyams, I got nothing against Jeremy Pruitt. I think he's doing a good job. But those are some arrogant people that cover that school. And I'm going to do everything now till I die in my power to block any recruit from wanting to go to Tennessee here in Memphis. if I got to call and talk to every high school
Well,
coach?
Elvis, let me jump in here for a second. I feel like I'm moderately qualified since I'm from Memphis and I went to Tennessee.
Sure.
Hyams has a good reputation. I will tell you, and I don't live in Tennessee any longer and haven't lived there for a long time, but there has always been a peculiar relationship between Memphis and East Tennessee. You know that. You live there. I don't understand why, and I'm trying to think of a great Tennessee player from Memphis, and some of the rub came 20 years ago when all of the best players in Memphis went where? To Alabama, and the big brouhaha with Albert Means and the accusations and Roy Adams and Logan Young and all that. I mean, I know you're familiar with all that. So I don't know why they would say that. I know there have been plenty of players to go to UT from Memphis, but when you grow up in Memphis, think about the choices that you have. Think about the schools that are closer to your high school than Knoxville. Ole Miss is down the road. Mississippi State isn't very far. Arkansas is across the river, and pretty good hike, but it's still across the river. The University of Memphis is very prominent. Alabama is significantly closer than Tennessee. So, I mean, I always used to wonder when I was driving to Knoxville, I could have been to 7 or 8 SEC schools closer than the one I attended, and I lived in the same state. I think that's the problem.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Paul, from the way I love my city more than I love that team, and I'm through with them, and anything I can do, if I got to talk to every high school coach in this town, anything I can do to sabotage a high school recruit in Memphis from going to Tennessee, you give Nick Saban, Lane Kiffin, Gus Malzahn, Kirby Smart my number, and tell them if they ever need help, call me. Thank you, Mr. Finebaum.
Okay, thank you very much. And I appreciate it. And what you heard there was interesting. Forget what I said. The idea that somebody would want to recruit against his school because of what a radio commentator said is fairly stunning to me, and I do this every day, but appreciate the call. We are up against a break. More of your phone calls at 855-242-7285. A lot of guests are going to be dropping by here. We've already had a few. Chantel Powell covers the Gamecocks. They got a big one this weekend, and we will be a terrific call. We began with the news of the Vandy, Missouri game being postponed, and now it was just made official. The LSU-Florida game, one of the most anticipated games of the season this weekend in Gainesville, has been rescheduled due to COVID.
Yeah, I think the SEC, timeline-wise, Paul, has mirrored the NFL a little bit, right? Like there was some austerity early, and I think they wisely waited till after students came back with the inevitable spikes that were expected, and I do think human nature is going to come into play on a college campus here, and I certainly don't know the causes for all these, but the abundance of caution, which has become the great cliche of COVID, it's hard to ask 100 kids to do that in a college environment.
So there is some flexibility. You basically have 12 weeks to play 7 games, 11 weeks to be exact. So there are some areas in which we can be flexible within the SEC schedule. This is part of the reason why I think prioritizing the conference slate was of the utmost importance. And even if you want to take it one step further, prioritizing the divisional conference slate was of the utmost importance.
Nick Saban has tested positive. According to a report just breaking moments ago, he was not at practice. It's being run by the 2 coordinators, and that is now being confirmed by ESPN.
Last week we had a hurricane in the midst of a pandemic and some teams a little bit thin. From a roster standpoint, we made it through, and we got to Friday after all of our COVID testing was in, and I looked at Charlie Hussey and said, surely next week won't be any worse than this one. And then we took about 5 minutes and said, yeah, it can. And
how do you think Alabama will play on Saturday? Like your personal opinion of how Alabama will play on Saturday against Georgia, not having head coach Nick Saban on the field?
Well, I think it's a big deal, Hunter. I mean, he's the greatest coach in college football history.
You know, Greg Sankey, the commissioner, and you yourself, what a wonderful, wonderful job y'all done about reporting everything and being transparent about the schools. I really hate it for Mr. Saban. I hope he's well. I hope his family stays well, and the players of Florida.
So Coach Saban has never lost to an assistant.
No, he hasn't.
If Georgia wins, does that count as a loss on that record?
You know, I would imagine the Lane Kiffin, Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp text chain is probably discussing that right now. And we welcome you back, and we appreciate you being here, and really looking forward to our next guest. We had Chantel Powell on a couple of weeks ago. Really had a fantastic conversation with her about the University of South Carolina and what's going on there. And it has been a roller coaster ride, and we are going to talk to her in just a few minutes. Right now, do we have her now? I just show up for work here. I have nothing to do with the process. Let's go to Chantel now. Thank you very much, Chantel. I was working on. I spent all day on that introduction, and I wasn't sure you were even there. Thank you for being here. Great to have you back.
Thanks for having me back. Glad I didn't scare you off last time.
No, I thought it was fantastic. Let me ask you, just the ride of the Gamecocks. There's so much conversation just here. And I'm not in South Carolina. What's this season been like so far? And I can't wait to ask you where it's going. First of all, what have the first 3 weeks been like for you covering the team and just listening to the fans and obviously the players and the coaches?
It's been quite an experience, especially just having to socially distance on top of everything. So fans, you know, typically are never satisfied, this season included. The games were a little closer than I think people may have expected, you know, playing ranked teams like Florida and Tennessee and still being right there within the game. So it was a couple things down the stretch that people weren't really thrilled with that tripped them up. So other than that, you have the usual chatter, especially coming off of a season like they had last year, 4-8. So the talk is kind of picking up a bit, but you know, the Vanderbilt kind of calms the nerves a little bit because winning cures all. This Auburn game is really one to kind of get them back on track if they can pull off an upset.
And if that happens, I do think the conversations about the future will abate for the time being. If not, I think it's pretty obvious that the fans are going to become more anxious. Just in covering Will Muschamp, right. What do you read from him? What do you get from him about? I mean, I know he's not the easiest person to get a lot out of. I mean, he's funny to a point, but not when he's losing.
Yeah, but I mean, he's been pretty calm this whole time. I think he kind of understands, having been with different SEC teams, like this is just the nature of the beast, especially in this conference. The expectations are pretty high no matter the team. So, you know, when you come into this conference, you know what to expect. And I think he's pretty good at, you know, keeping the outside pressure out and just focusing on what he feels he needs to focus on.
Chantel, you can't undersell this game. The loser is going to be in trouble. I think that's a foregone conclusion. But as you look at the play of this team, you mentioned the games have been close. The Tennessee game could have gone either way. The Florida game, right. Great effort, fell apart though. I mean, we're 4 weeks now into the season. Do you have a sense of what this team is all about?
Well, they're trying to get different pieces involved early offensively. So you see Shi Smith at wide receiver and Kevin Harris at running back emerging as just, you know, the main focal points of this offense. Colin Hill seems pretty settled in to go from, you know, playing at Colorado State to playing in the SEC. He doesn't seem to have a whole bunch of growing pains right now. So they're just trying to get other people involved offensively. They have the weapons. They showed throughout the last couple games that they can make plays and be those pieces. You see, like, the Carrion Joyner, Xavier Legette. They're really counting on tight end Nick Muse to come alive and get them some yards upfield. And then defensively, that's the unit, you know, I think had the higher expectations because you knew what to expect. You had a defensive line where, you know, some people were returning and had those expectations. You have a secondary that's, projected to go in the NFL draft should they go this year. So they're really waiting for everyone to just get settled in and really take that next step. Because like you said, we're 4 games into the season, so it's time to kind of start turning the corner a little bit and getting into mid-season form.
What is the early read on Bobo as the offensive coordinator? Is it too early or opinions starting to formulate?
I think people seem kind of, they seem okay with him because, like you said, the games have been 1 to 2 score games. So the offense is moving up the field pretty easily. It's just been coming down to like 1 or 2 mistakes. So they get those cleaned up, and, we have a different record this season. But overall, I think they seem pretty satisfied with what he's been able to do thus far.
Chantel Powell with us, managing editor, SI's Gamecock Digest. The Gamecocks take on Auburn. Critical game because a loss for the Gamecocks, and suddenly you're staring at 3 losses. Schedule has been incredibly difficult, and there are still many, many challenges remaining. Same thing you can say for Auburn, but let's just say this game does not go well. As you look ahead, or if it does, as you look ahead for the rest of the season, Chantel, this is so different with a truncated schedule. What are the expectations, and are they adjusting as we move forward?
I did see an article posted by another site about Will Muschamp's buyout clause. So, of course, that talk is always going on. I think the expectations continue to stay about the same. They knew coming in that the scheduling was harder than a lot of teams, and then especially going to an all-conference schedule. So it's not, expecting to be a bottom feeder or anything like that, because nobody's ever happy with losing consistently. But I think there's a bit more nuance, and they can see a little more growth in the team and base it on that versus, outright wins and losses. So, like, again, that Florida game, when it comes down to 2 possessions, and, the clock management kind of becomes an issue, that kind of thing it doesn't sit well with fans, but, it's better than being outright blown out. So you can see what the team is able to do on the field and just kind of go from there.
And Chantel, the reason I bring the schedule up, with a win against Auburn, I think people are going to settle down, and they should. But here's the outlier. If the Gamecocks lose to Auburn, that is 3 losses next week at LSU, and then I'm looking at the schedule: A&M, Ole Miss, Missouri, Georgia, and Kentucky. There's not a sure win the rest of the way. Maybe Missouri at home, but it becomes a real problem. And you mentioned the buyout, and I know what the administrators have said, and certainly Ray Tanner has strenuously defended his hire, understandably so. But at some point, a loss here would I think, unfortunately, and there's a bye week, I think. There's no bye week, or is there? The next week.
After Halloween.
Yeah, right. 24th is the next game. So there's a bye week after the LSU game. That a loss to Auburn and a loss to LSU would make that bye week very difficult.
Yeah, and you also got to factor in, from a morale standpoint. Right now, everyone seems locked in. Everyone seems to understand that, again, it is the little things that they have to clean up in order to really be in these games and give themselves a chance. Muschamp has been really adamant about their record in 1-score games. They're 14-8. So he feels confident in his team that if they give themselves a shot down the stretch, that, it could be anybody's ball game, and why not theirs. So I think he still has a good handle on the locker room, and everyone is still locked in and focused. But 2 wins back-to-back, even if it is to, a ranked opponent, and then, the defending national champions, as, kind of shorthanded as they are, that kind of does something to your confidence. So I think if he can just keep them battling and, at least keep them in that game, it makes it easier going into that bye week should they lose both of those games.
Yeah, the bigger issue, Chantel, I know you cover South Carolina, but Auburn losing, I think, would create more problems for that coach than even Muschamp. But it's an interesting proposition. Well, I appreciate you coming on again. It's always great to talk to you. You have such an interesting perspective, and we hope to stay in touch, and maybe there'll be some good news for the Gamecocks the rest of the way. Thank you for your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Great to have you, Chantel, joining us. We are going to take a break. We mentioned a couple of minutes ago, but let me mention again. I realize some people are maybe getting into the car, getting home, whatever people now do in the afternoon. Nick Saban was visited by a doctor today. He remains asymptomatic. He's feeling fine, according to the official release. That's what we know, and we will head to the